Farner. I am a Global Wine Executive MBA graduate of 2021, and I'm thrilled to be here today to moderate this discussion and to introduce Erica Harrop. Erica is a Sonoma State MBA alum who began her career as a winemaker after studying enology at UC Davis and at the University of Bordeaux. The path that Erica has forged in the beverage industry has had its share of twists and turns, leading to success as the founder and owner of Global Package, focusing on glass bottles for the high-end wine and spirits industry. Not only is she running her own business, she's a great mom who has passed along her strong work ethics to her kids. She's an avid sailor, and she is the go-to host for gatherings with her friends, even last-minute gatherings. I'm going to turn it over now to Erica, who will tell you more about all of these things. And don't hesitate to put any questions in the chat. We will get to those during the course of the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks,
Go,
Dana.
Erica.
Anybody has questions about sailing, I'm all in. I want to thank the whole group that invited me. Kelly Silva and Tiffany O'Neill, who's on, and Chelsea Spomer and Diane DeRoma, who I was communicating with earlier. And of course, Dana, thank you for the very, very welcoming introduction. That's really sweet. I graduated with my MBA from Sonoma State in 2002. And it is really one of the best decisions that I ever made in my professional life. I want to talk today about an unexpected path that pivoted me in a direction that I never expected, and how you might want to consider doing the same in your future career paths. It was the path that I didn't choose, but it offered the least resistance and brought me the most value to the industry that I love. This only came from many perceived failures along the way. It started with my love of the wine industry. In high school, my chemistry teacher up in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains said, "You love science so much." I said, "But I want to be in the country." And he said, "You should be a winemaker. That would blend the best of science with nature." And at 16, I came up with this idea that I was going to be a winemaker, a consulting winemaker, and I would visit all of these new burgeoning wineries in the foothills and be their consultant. So I always aspired to having my own company. I went on to Davis and then did the education abroad and had a wonderful experience for a year and a half in France, and did get a degree there in Bordeaux and worked at an amazing winery. It's in Pomerol, Chateau Petrus. And so my destiny was pretty well set in stone what I was going to do in my future. As a winemaker, I would never have thought of changing careers or embracing the supply side of the industry. But my first failures, if we can call them that, are that I did not fit into the profile of a winemaker in the early 1980s, although there were some examples of powerful women who were forging the way. With 2 degrees in winemaking, I just could not make headway. I spent 3 years at the Remy Martin distillery in California, from a temporary employee to their research enologist. But the glass ceiling was very evident, as it was a French company. In 1987, through an accidental introduction at the gym, I met my future employers of an unknown bottle import company. I had planned that it would be short-term, selling bottles to wineries to my contemporaries. The draw, well, the opportunity to travel internationally in Europe to visit glass suppliers, and secondarily to meet wineries where I could find my new best winemaking job in production. At the age of 25 years old, I felt that the risk was low and the education was going to be enormous. That was the first pivot in a direction I never expected. The outcome was that I created a competency unique in the glass industry. I was alone selling a product that I totally understood based on my scientific background, and thus could more easily put a winery and a supplier's needs together. I was creating my own path and becoming very successful at it. But alas, I returned to my passion, which was back at the distillery for another 3 years, this time promoted to facility manager and master distiller. But soon I found that nothing had changed, and it was really like my feet were stuck in the mud with my career. I was running the distillery where I had started, but the owners had no strategy for success. They eventually laid me off along with hundreds of other employees due to the financial issues, which was the first time I was ever fired. Maybe it was failure in that I didn't move on beforehand, but it was a reality check that my value was elsewhere. After production in a total of 6 years and packaging for 3 years, ranging from 1984 to 1993, I was ready to start my own business, or so I thought. I was being prompted by suppliers overseas to sell for them. I had some business classes at Sonoma State, but no real business plan. I invested all of my own money and was dependent on one supplier in Italy as my source. The Italian manager had become a very good friend of mine, and I believed that it was just all going to work out. Well, within the first 3 months, communication was not good. I was spending all my money on faxes and phone calls. Luckily, I tapped into a cousin who was living in Italy with banking connections, and he found out that the glass factory was actually filing bankruptcy. Well, I had no out, and I had no alternative plan. It was a failure to launch. And even worse, I had 2 containers of glass that they just shipped me that I had not requested, and that they just loaded a bunch of stuff in, and they just figured I could sell it. Well, I believe in serendipity and was contacted by a person who wanted to take over management in the same California company that I had originally been in. I wanted to keep my own company, but seeing the train wreck was actually coming. I agreed to join for a very high salary at the time and wrote my own contract that would let me free without a non-compete. And that was not by accident. My 2 containers arrived, and my new old employer paid for that immediately, and I eventually sold this unwanted glass over time. Looking back, I was saved again at the last minute, and luckily so, by pivoting back to where I was most valued. Unfortunately, I saw that the CEO was doing some illegal things and was a truly horrible person. He was in Kentucky, working in spirits while I was running the majority of the business in California. Jealousy and brinksmanship created so much conflict that I took him on and lost the battle to the French bank that owned us. My analysis was faulty if I had actually planned to stay. I didn't have a business degree compared to the CEO who went to INSEAD, which is a very prestigious French university. And I had once again pushed too hard on the glass ceiling. Business is business, and I was out. I will note that the French bank president called me 3 months later and told me that he apologized and that he probably made a mistake in judgment. Now it was 1995, leaving the company where I had built the West Coast sales in less than 2 years, from $3 million to $10 million. I had also created stronger relationships with all the suppliers who I continued to network with. The largest glass company in the portfolio, a French group, immediately wanted to hire me to run their US office. After 2 months of negotiating, I was on board, working from my home at the dining room table, starting their US business that would flourish in 10 years to $40 million. Oh, and this time I had my MBA. So I should have all the tools needed to grow with the group. But again, I hit the glass ceiling and wanted more, but was fired by my French boss, a man who wanted my job. Failure? Well, I don't know. The golden handcuffs were off, and I had to find my new path. I was asking myself if taking a salary was better than taking the risk to try a business again. What turned my decision was a meeting with a very prominent business owner in the glass industry who told me I would not make it because customers are not the formula to success. The suppliers are. Well, funny, he didn't realize I had suppliers in the bag and I had no customers. That was my push. My big personal challenge was that now I was a single mother with twin boys 6 years old. So this was not a simple decision, but it was one I had to make. Here I was again, starting my own business. It was 2006. I made a plan to talk to all my past European suppliers. This time I was going to get funding from one of them to get me started. My good, clean reputation got me the funds. I asked for twice the amount that I thought I needed, and thank goodness I did. This time I had an MBA and I had a really good business plan in hand. I also used the free services at the Small Business Counseling Office that the city offered, and I had a really super mentor. The company name Global Package was done purposefully to describe that sourcing was global, not limited, but also that I might sell other products that would be part of the whole package, not just a bottle. At Sonoma State, I learned that it's important not to pigeonhole your business and be prepared to pivot as necessary. Little did I know that we were heading to the Great Recession, and by 2007, there was no glass available. The currency exchange was horrible, making European glass 40% more costly. And by 2009, wineries, who were my clients, were facing an economy that reduced their lines of credit. I never knew how bad it was going to get, but I could see I was needing to find other ways to make an income to keep afloat and not use my reserved glass money. Fortunately, I worked from home and I didn't have any costly office to pay for. And along came my guardian angels. They were new companies that were starting businesses unrelated to my core business, and they needed a foothold. My reputation for industry knowledge meant I had 3 different consulting jobs paying me retainers that kept me afloat. That decision to take them on during 2007 to 2010 saved me from losing the company. I will forever be grateful for those little miracles. Staying power was very important. I knew that because of my business plan and knowledge of how hard it is to start a business, I really needed to make the milestones. The first one is 3 years to judge the possible success of my business. The second one is 5 years in, you should be making a profit. Without those measures, too many companies stop too early. A year into the start of my company, a prior employee of mine, who I'd helped to find a better job 10 years earlier, came back to work with me part-time. She'd always respected me and was a great help for about a year. She would later come back when I could pay her full-time, and now she's with me even today. That was the start of my hiring and delegating so that I could grow my business. During 2008, there were companies starting to import from China to Chinese glass due to the huge glass shortages. I was importing from Europe and knew I had to diversify. And again, serendipitously, I received a cold call from the CEO of a Spanish company right near where I was going to be vacationing 2 weeks later. I was recommended to him from a French business owner who said my reputation preceded me. Wow. That meeting changed the course of our companies because, for one, we shared a common belief in only working in high-end products as per my business plan, and 2, they were establishing themselves in China. I could not have asked for better partners, and to this day, we are successfully working together. This is yet another pivot in a direction that unexpectedly presented itself overnight that filled a need for survival. Most of the other Chinese import companies are no longer in business because their only trick was to find glass and import it, but they had no knowledge of the technical parts of the industry. I had other options, but this company fit best into my need for independence and to follow the same high quality path. The problems we had, quite a few. Warehousing, we've moved 6 times in 15 years. It's extremely costly and painful, and it's not part of my business plan. Currency exchanges after sales were made, tariffs, duties, and crazy freight issues the past 5 years greatly affect the daily operations of Global Package. The company has grown in 16 years to 9 employees, 3 warehouses spread all over the United States. Our suppliers are from everywhere, domestic to Europe to China. We also sell other products as well. We sell computer labels, We sell stoppers, boxes, as well as glass. Through it all, it was important to keep a positive attitude, staying focused and staying motivated. My problem solving is challenged daily, and I am not an absentee owner. The lessons I learned from prior experiences is get that darn business plan and read it often, especially early on. You will get lots of advice from people who don't know your business or what you're building. Don't let them talk you into spending money to appear flashy. Be sure that you're honest and work harder than any of your employees. They will respect you and they will follow you. I had lots of help along the way, but that came because of honesty and hard work and the ability to pivot in new directions. Sounds cliche because it's true. My team believes in what we do. They're proud to be here. Leadership means you need to be leading and making the choices before it's too late. Many times I could have been derailed. I was definitely discouraged often. I remind myself often of the measures of success, the respect that I'm shown, the opportunities that are provided me, and the ability to stay focused on the best outcomes for both suppliers and customers. And mostly, my team I work with is precious, and we support each other every day with the focus on success. And that's Global Package.
Thank you so much, Erica. That's wonderful. It's wonderful advice, and it's wonderful to hear the story of all of your successes. Please, anyone, feel free to add questions into the chat, but I thought of a few as I was listening. Erica, you mentioned at the beginning that you had an entrepreneurial attitude even when you were in high school. You felt that you wanted to run your own business, but you ended up in some very high-powered positions. Do you think that if you had felt respected by your employers, that you would have been able to follow your eventual dream of starting your own business? Or do you feel like the frustration with your employers is what pushed you to eventually fulfill your dreams?
That's a really poignant question, because for me, what I always wanted to do in the businesses I was in, I wanted to create where people felt collectively they were succeeding. And in these bigger groups, especially in the really big groups, I found it fascinating that there would be these separations of people, motivation. They have different motivations. You put enough people together, you end up with something different than what was intended. And when I was very early on working, starting, I remember being told that I expected too much out of the company, not for myself, but that I expected some version of utopia. And I've continued to believe that. And I actually feel like that here we've succeeded, that out of respect for each other, we've created something better than I've ever been told is possible. And that was really important to me. So no matter where I was, I kept trying to find the collective where we all were motivated toward the same thing. And I would have stayed had I seen that. And like I mentioned, the golden handcuffs, the company I was at until 2006, I was one of the most highly paid people because I kept trying to leave. And they know you can't go. And so, you're stuck. You're like, okay, well, that'll be nice. You don't start your own company because you're going to make more money. You don't do that. You do it because you believe in something better than where you came from, better than you see. And that's why I did it. So I had been offered a lot of money not to do it. But when somebody tells you the opposite of what you know you have to go the other direction. And as I mentioned, I've worked for people when you work for people that you don't respect, or it's really hard. It's very hard. And that's, I think, where an entrepreneur says, I have very strong convictions. I don't just go home at 5 o'clock. I want to do the best I can for the company. And if that's how you feel, then you have that entrepreneurial motivation.
Excellent. That's great. We've got a couple questions coming in. Yav Goodsman has asked, what type of business model do you have? Is it an LLC, a CORP, a corporation? And why did you choose to go with that model? Is it the same model that you started the company with?
So yeah, it started as an LLC, and then we, for tax reason, have an S Corp inside of it for tax purposes. The reason I didn't start with a corporation at the time, because it was starting out small, it made sense to be an LLC. Ideas that you're protected enough. It's less costly if you're a corporation. It's something like back then $5,000 to file your taxes, or to process your C Corp and do all of that. So it was more costly. And since I'm a sole owner, there's no reason to have a C Corp. And the S Corp I can have, and I can even have partners, but I don't. And so it's mainly, what is the cost of doing it and how much protection do you have? So the LLC with an S Corp inside is fine.
Excellent. Great. Jorge Morion says, I really enjoyed hearing your story and the story of our glass supplier, Global Package.
Hi. It's me.
The question, after each failure or learning experience, what motivated you to get up and start over again? And also, you mentioned your mentor. Can you talk a little bit more about your mentor, how you found them, how they guided and supported you throughout these failures, and
Right.
through your recoveries?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
The thing is that when you have really strong beliefs, things happen to you, and it's not your fault. If you get fired for negligence, or if I had very, very strong beliefs, and I could see what was happening. When you can see it happening, then you're not afraid of it. It's one thing if you're not aware. At the big French glass company I was at, they were preparing to sell the company was being sold from a private family to a financial group. So I was told 2 years prior, watch out. You're one of the highest paid employees in the whole company. And I kept saying, well, that's because I live in America, and that's what happens here. So it was hard because they were all things that I learned. The failures and the pivoting, all of those things that changed my course, I saw them as gifts, because I learned something every time. And I keep, I remember my father told me a long time ago, I don't know how old I was, very young, and he said, the best thing that'll ever happen to you is when you get fired. And I tell that to people, best thing, because if you're not pushing it, then you don't know what's on the other side. And it's, if you don't want to be fired, then be the gardener. They never get fired. So, though, the metaphor for gardener, what does that mean? It means don't do anything. Just keep your job. You probably don't like it, and go home at 5. That's not the entrepreneurial spirit. The person that counseled me, it was somewhat short term. I mean, honestly, some of the best people that I met were at Sonoma State, my professors who are no longer there. And I was already president of a company while I was still going to get my MBA, because I'd stopped. And whether it's Armand Galinsky or others that had left before they retired, but I would challenge their thoughts. We'd be sitting in a class of 8 people, and I'm always the one asking questions, because I'm running a company, and jamming to get there by 6 o'clock. So having tapped into the professors at Sonoma State were just golden to me. The Small Business Association, where they offered, you could bring in your plan. I mean, I think they were expecting small businesses who were going to open a jewelry store. And then I walk with, and this guy was great. I can't remember what his background was because it was 17 years ago, but, he really dug it because he'd been a businessman and he'd been at it for 45 years. So he enjoyed it. He enjoyed imagining what I was going to do. And he said, remember, take your business plan, look at the high and the low. And as I mentioned, I started at the end of 2006. I didn't even reach my low point for 2.5 years. Like the worst case scenario took because the world was falling apart, right? And as I mentioned, I had to find a way to stay alive because I could see it wasn't my fault. And that's the thing. It's like, why did you do it? It's like, well, I always say all the time, had I seen what was happening, if I could look into the future, you're right, it's terrifying. You wouldn't do it. But you don't know that. There is no time machine. It doesn't tell you what it's going to be in 3 or 4 years. But when those opportunities come and say, I need some help, I'll pay you a retainer. And you really want to run your glass company, but gas is now $5.50 a gallon. And somebody wants to meet me in Hillsburg. I knew it cost me $40 to make an appointment. That's what it costs just to get there. And if I didn't, I was calculating every day how to survive. So like I say, those were my guardian angels. These companies called and said, could you help me? And I just thought, how can this be true? Right in the very beginning. But I had total belief in what I was doing. The suppliers had total belief that, the customers didn't come. I don't blame them a bit, because the first customers I had were people who didn't know me. Because the people who knew me thought, well, she'll probably go back to work for another company because that's really hard. So if I give her an order, she'll probably not be doing this anymore in a year. And then it took about 3 years for those people who knew me to start taking me seriously. But I built my portfolio on all new accounts. And I'm extremely proud of that because starting your business and taking your old customers just isn't that much fun, actually. But taking your suppliers, that's a whole nother thing. So that was a lot more fun.
You've mentioned a couple times these consulting jobs that you got when you were first opening your. What were those? Also glass consulting jobs? What were those?
No. They were They had nothing to do with my core business. One was a designer, and I had known him through my prior company. He designed bottles. And he was out of Australia, Tucker Creative, and he wanted to have a person here representing him. He already had some accounts and he needed somebody who could go see the accounts. And of course, I'm thinking I'm doubling up on this because I'm going to go see the marketing people and I'm going to find out what they're doing and I'll eventually be selling them glass or not. But that motivation of finding some symbiotic relationship. Another one is a winery that was doing a lot of work for smaller customers, and they wanted to find more clients. So they were hoping I could go talk to some of these different companies. And the third was a company that wanted to make a new type of cork out of silicon. They were a big silicon company, multi-billion-dollar company, and were trying to spin off new businesses and didn't know anything about the wine industry. So I educated them about the industry. I took them out to show them customers, and it, it was fascinating to me. It cut into my core business, but at the time I really wasn't working with sources that financially were feasible. French glass went 40% higher, and it eventually came back down again. But it was one of those where if you only had European products, that was very hard. Now I work domestically as well as China and Europe, and so and all high-end stuff, all custom stuff I love to do. My really good friends are in marketing at wineries, and they say that must be really, really hard. They can't even imagine what I do, and I go, no, I got it. It's like I've done it for so long. I love doing it. I love the creative work, the technical creative work. I'm not a designer, but I love that. I love creating stuff with designers and with glass factories.
That's great. I've got another question from Yave or Yave. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you were to restart your business today, how would you approach this goal and what would you do different, knowing what you know now?
I have had so much fun growing this company. You know, it's like climbing the Himalayas and someone says, would you rather get an escalator? You know, I can't think of anything I would do. The one thing maybe I would do, you know, it's funny, people who own their own businesses, you know, we talk about the hiring and firing. And I think sometimes you hold on to people too long when you need to move on. And sometimes you don't realize that the people you think that they're filling the position, and thank goodness someone's filling the position. You can't imagine there's somebody better for that position. Those people leave, somebody better fills in every time. It's like amazing. It's like, should have done this before, you know? So if there would be one thing I would do, it might be, you know, realizing when it's time to find better people to keep you moving faster forward. That would be one thing I would say. And I have a funny story about that, because the person who's been here longest, she is our operations manager, and I don't know what title to give her, because, you know, there aren't that many. And it's like, I don't care. She could be vice president. It doesn't matter. And when I hired her, I knew who she was. I knew what she was capable of, and I knew she had very strong convictions about things. And I wanted to hire her, but I didn't make enough money to hire her. So I interviewed her, and then she was no longer. She was kind of looking around because she wasn't super happy. So I hired her 9 months later, when I barely had enough money, because I had a couple of really big accounts. So I knew I could hire her. That if I had that account, I could pay her. She found out through someone else that she was making more money than I was making. And so this kind of ties in with the whole employee thing, like know when to go find good employees. And sometimes you pay them more than you're going to make. And so she quit. And I said, why are you quitting? And she said, well, I feel really badly because I'm taking so much money from the business. And I said, are you kidding me? I did that on purpose. I said, someday I'm going to make a lot more money than you, but I need you here and I want you to stay. And so she agreed. And, you know, I said, there is no guilt. I am not suffering. This is the best decision I made. So I would put it on hiring. That would be the one thing that I would say you need to pay attention as you're building your staff. You shouldn't be ashamed to say sometimes you just need to get rid of some people. It's okay.
That's great advice and difficult advice.
You want to be a leader. You want people to follow. You've got to set the tempo. It's what you have to do.
You have talked a lot about your business plan, and you know, going back to the business plan, making sure that you're sticking to the business plan. But then you also talk about these serendipitous moments where there's been opportunity to, you know, to open up to different things, which ended up forcing you to stray from the business plan, but ended up being great opportunities. Is there a way to strike that balance, or do you do pros and cons? How are you able to find that balance?
Right. And you know, and the thing about a good business plan is that it's open to interpretation, right? You can't say, I'm only going to sell vanilla ice cream, that I'm going to make the best, and that's all I'm going to sell. And then you're in a chocolate world, and now you're kind of messed up. So my business plan, knowing that I'm in the North Bay, knowing that I work in wine and spirits, but spirits takes a long time to develop. Just ask Jorge. Wine, people need, you know what they need. It's a selection. They buy it. It's something you can it's easier short term to do. Spirits we've developed over the last 16 years, and now is a very large part of what we do. But my business plan specifically was, no matter what you're doing, stay within a 50-mile radius. Do not be tempted to fly to Texas or to drive to, Southern California because somebody wants to see you. Don't do it. And I had to keep looking at my business plan to remind me that 90% of our industry that I was going to sell to at the price point for high glass, for high-end product, that it's easy to stray because somebody calls and says, I really want to see you. That was really important. And I read my business plan easily 2 or 3 times a month, if easily, because I kept being, like I say, people will draw you to something. People will tell you, I've got a friend, and then you're thinking, no, stick to your business plan. But it is open to interpretation, meaning that you've got to leave it open enough to say, does this fit? Is it tongue and groove with what I'm already doing? Are the pewter labels drawing me away from the core, which is glass? And they're not. They're actually very, very much together. The business plan didn't mention that, but it said have really good suppliers that are going to be long-term. Don't look at something that's short-term. Don't let competitors get too close. You've got to protect your business, but always be very, very trustworthy, even with your competitors. I have great relationships with competitors. I really do, because in my industry there aren't, in quality suppliers, we're all friendly, because we're still going to be here in 15, 20 years. We're all the same people. In our industry, it's it's smaller than the wine industry. Glass supply, it's really small. And the wine industry is small, so these days it's really, really an honor to get a call from a customer who says, I was told to give you a call. And who tells them that? Is often somebody who didn't even buy from me, but who call and ask questions, talk to my staff, and for whatever reason isn't buying from us, but they refer us. It's amazing to me. It's like, who could, is there anything I'd change in what we do? Not really. It's really gratifying. I don't have any partners. It's tough. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but no one's looking over my shoulder saying, I think there's a better way of doing it. I'm sure there are at times, but
But I think that anecdote that you just shared, that, these are pitches that in that moment you probably viewed as a failure.
Yeah.
We put the time and effort into the pitch for this customer, and they went a different direction. That's a loss, and you could just, throw that away, but that's not the case. Yeah. What ends up happening is that person turns into an advocate for you and gives the, it's once again, your point of view on failures as being something to relish and profit from. That's great.
Thanks for putting it that way. You're right.
It's
never
really
be discouraged.
important.
And the hardest part, like I say, the first 5 years, it's very discouraging, especially if you're starting a business. You probably are pretty sure you're good at what you do, and it's really hard because you're trying to get people to trust you. I mean, it depends on what you're starting, but if it's something where there has to be longevity, that you'll be providing for them down the road, there has to be a lot of trust. And so no matter what, you should never be discouraged by it. And when one of the things that I process in my head when I think about successful business, in my prior business, where we grew and became very important, I would say my success rate was like 9 out of 10. Like if I talked to 10 people, I'd get 9 of them to buy something from me. I mean, it was like, my gosh, how is this happening? It kind of motivates you to want your own business, especially I could say, thank you very much. I want this other guy to come in and now run the company because you're not important enough. And then when I started, I had maybe 1 in 10. And I thought, when am I going to get to like 7? Measuring when, the amount I'm investing, am I on the right path? Are people wanting what I have? right? That's really important. And it's not easy, and it doesn't come right away. And you know, the fact that I'd done it before, I knew I could do it again. I hadn't, you know, it was just a matter of patience. It was just patience, just waiting for it to happen again. And then it finally started happening. Just like, do I consider that a failure? It's like, well, if he passes it to someone else and they call, okay, how do I mark that other person? Do I count my 9 out of 10? You know, but it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling when people call you and are willing to work with you. And it happens every day, and it's a wonderful feeling.
It's really great. Speaking of challenges that have come up, did COVID affect your work? Were there supply challenges, logistical challenges? How did that?
So we were considered essential. So internal, our organization, we continued to work. And it would be very hard for us to work off-site based on our setup that we have. And what really affected us were the factories that had to shut down for 2 weeks, not produce. Everything got off schedule. I mean, you didn't even know, because most of my suppliers are overseas, and I just came back from Spain 3 weeks ago, and the news right now in Europe is worse than anybody here knows. I mean, I was there and I was listening to this stuff going, oh my gosh, this is terrible, because of the war, because of the shortage. You know, it's COVID just continues, you know, this incredible disarray. COVID was actually a very small part of it. You know, we had tariffs applied, we had duties. I had the glass that I was already bringing in go up to 68% higher cost because of duties and tariffs. It basically, bam, happened. It happened like over 6 months. In 6 months, everything I programmed to bring in all went up 68%. That's really disruptive. And right about the time that factories are starting to run again, and you can't really bring in all the glass because it's too expensive, and then freight went up to $20,000 a container. Is like, okay, and customers, it took a while for them to see it. You know, when you're over there, when you're ordering the container to ship, when you're visiting your suppliers, you see how incredibly difficult things are. And it's so hard to tell people back here, because for one, nobody wants to hear it. And two, it's like, well, didn't you just say that your biggest problem 3 months ago was this other thing? And I go, yeah, you know, it's still a problem. And now we have a new problem. And then we've got a new problem. Now we've got strikes at the port. So now European containers don't even come to the West Coast. You know, I'm sorry that your stuff's not here, but they won't pick it up. You can't make it up. You just, you know, it's not possible. It's all true. It's just, so it's always trying. It's the last 5 years have been really, really difficult, because every day there's something new, you know, that you just don't anticipate. And then it gets better and you go, yay. And then a new thing happens, and you know, like port strikes, you know, it's anyway, but it's a challenge, and it doesn't bother me, because I've seen it basically my whole professional life. So you just know it's going to end, and you know there'll be another one. You just keep going. But you have to have strong conviction and a stomach of, you got to be ready for it. It's easy to say, well, I still got my paycheck and I'm going home. You know, that's easy. Oh, wow. You know, the boss has got a lot of problems. That's not fun.
No. There's a pertinent question to this. As a sole owner, do you currently have mentors? Or if not, where do you find guidance when these challenges, you know, are you able to talk with friends about this? Do you have other people in the industry is it your employees?
Yeah, you know, it's hard. I don't really have anybody that I tap into. I have friends who are in some version of the industry. Most people don't know how difficult this is on supply, you know, international supply chain. And all we can do is kind of co-commiserate, you know, like, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? And then people are incredibly generous with information. If you ask, they'll tell you. I was talking to a customer who also imports some of their own product, and they gave me great information. You know, we're all collectively trying to succeed. So there isn't anybody who shares that type of mentorship. It would be wonderful. I've always thought that would be really neat, but I really haven't had that, and it is somewhat lonely. You know, they say it's lonely at the top. It's lonely when there isn't somebody you can turn to for advice, who will actually give you something of value other than, you know, that sounds really hard. Like, that's not helping. So, you know, it's just, yeah, I rant. That's a good thing. I have friends who like to hear me.
That's good. That's good.
Like you said, I have very good friends. We often gather, and I get to vent, and everybody gets to vent, and it's kind of a collective of people who have very responsible jobs, who are learning how to survive through sharing.
Yeah, good. Panina asks and says, thank you for sharing your success story with us. It's very motivating. And they have the question, as a woman with this business, it means wearing several hats. And how do you find that balance?
Yeah. You know, somewhat assuming we might even be talking about the fact that I was raising two boys from the age of 6, you know, basically being responsible for everything, including the supermarket shopping. You can't really, again, if you know how hard it is, you wouldn't do it. You just do it. And I do, and I wore a lot of hats, but you know what was interesting is I worried that my children would not aspire to ever have their own company, that I was setting a bad example for them, that all they saw was just somebody who worked all the time. You know, I would come home, I'd make them dinner, they'd go to bed, and I'd start working all night long. And it worried me. I thought, you know, this is not a good work ethic, but I'm building something and I have to keep building. And the highest praise I've ever gotten is from my own children, who really want to succeed on their own. And one of them wants to come back and take over the company one day. And I couldn't imagine anything that brings me more pride. So yeah, you wear a lot of hats, but you always set the best example. And you know when to lie down and take a nap at 5:30, 6 o'clock, because you know that you need that nap, because you got to get up and make dinner at 6:37. It's hard, and especially when you know that what you're doing is not necessarily being recognized by the people above you or around you. I'll give an example. When I was working for the French company, we all know that, you know, France has great policies for their maternity leaves. I had twins, and 5 weeks after I had my children, I had them in May. You know, I didn't plan for that, but you know, the bottling season is basically June, July, August. A lot of people bottle. So this is back in the early, well, that was 1999, and they said, we have a crisis at work, you need to come back. So at 5 weeks, I went back to work. And I work for a French company, so figure that one out. Yeah, you wear a lot of hats and you just say, you know, I can do this. And I don't know if they can even remember that. You know, I don't know that they remember that. I do. I remember how hard it was to make it through those months. You know, I went home, of course I did. I went home in the middle of the day, you know, but it was like I had to be present to control the situation at work. You know, because I could kind of smooth over the issues that were going on between the customer and why the ships are late and all that kind of stuff. That's what you do when you're an import. You know that bad things happen all the time. But the people there weren't, it wasn't my company. I wasn't choosing all the people who worked there. It wasn't my choice. And so the people who worked there was too much pressure, and they were not happy. So I had to come back and I knew that I could figure it out, and I did. So it was hard, 5-week-old babies, and off I go. So, I'm not telling you I showed up at 8 and then I came home at 6. That was not happening, but I did go. So, yeah, it was tough. So, and my kids, we have the best relationship. I found a wonderful woman who was a Montessori teacher who is still to this day thinks of them as her own children. It was a great environment. It was, I was fortunate they could stay home in our home. I didn't have to take them anywhere. I was very fortunate. I could create the environment for my children. That mattered a lot for me. So.
That's great. One of the things that struck me as you were speaking today, and when we've spoken previously as well,
Mm-hmm.
when you share these stories, there are all of these hardships, all of these, brick walls that came up against your opportunities.
Yeah.
And you've gone through them all, and you've made a huge success for yourself. But what struck me when I was speaking to you previously is that you said, I've been very lucky.
Yeah.
And I am so impressed with your positivity through all of this. I think a lot of us will go, oh, well, I was going to start my own business, but it was the recession, and what could I do? I had to fold.
Right.
It was a horrible boss that was breaking the law, but I was making a lot of money. What could I do? I needed to. So do you have any words of advice on how you've been able to maintain that attitude of positivity to keep you through your success? Because it seems like that's a big key to how you've gotten to where you are.
When you're saying that, the only thing that comes to my head is stay true to yourself. You have to stay true to yourself. I was asked by that CEO who was doing illegal things to sign a document. Just here, sign this document. And I said, what is this document? And the CFO was at the table. We are now still friends after 30 years. She sat at the table, and she had flown in from Kentucky. The CEO had flown in from Kentucky, signed this document, and it had to do with valuation of the inventory. And I knew it was wrong. And I said, I'm not signing this document. And that CFO later said, I can't believe you did that. I don't want to make it too much, but she said she didn't really have the courage. And it blew me away. It's like, stand true to yourself. How can you live that way? And I think that's why I am so lucky that people who know me from all over the world will say, talk to Erica, she'll always tell you the truth. And you may not like it, but she's going to tell it to you. And, a lot of people say, I don't want to say that I'm opinionated, but I'm always thinking. I have opinions, I'm putting together a world that I live every day. And like, how do you make through all these things? And that way I'm really lucky, because, when you throw the game once, people will remember. So stay true to yourself. And that has brought me more fortune than the failures that I've had to, than the challenges, the things that people have put in front of me. And then you have to do your own business. Because everyone else is going to ask you to sign that paper, and you're going to just keep running into another brick wall.
Well, great. I think that's just the perfect way to end this, where your theme was about perseverance and pivoting and keeping going through, even when things seem difficult. And just thank you so much for all that you have shared with us today. Tiffany has posted in the chat information on the Alumni Forum and the Alumni Association. And please feel free to reach out to them with these great questions that you have. And the alumni are available to you to answer those kinds of questions about mentorship and that kind of thing. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you, Erica, so much for sharing your wonderful
a great job.
stories.
Thank you.
Thanks. And
so
thank you, Tiffany, for putting it together.
Yeah. Thanks
Have
again,
a great
everybody.
rest of your week, everyone. Stay cool.
Stay cool. Bye.
Thanks.